How could a nation whose land was washed by the greatest flood in history, and which witnessed with its own eyes the destruction of disbelieving humanity beneath waves as high as mountains, forget after only a few generations that divine terror? How could they return in humiliation to prostrate before deaf stones that can neither benefit nor harm? What is the hidden secret that made the descendants of the survivors of the pure ark dig up the graves of paganism anew and sell their pure monotheism for illusions crafted by their own hands, allowing polytheism to creep back into the virgin world? Welcome to my small world. I am Dodi, and from the bottom of my heart, welcome to the Dodi drama family. Join our big family now. Subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell, and let us begin our together in this enchanting world. Chapter 1: The World After the Flood and the Hidden Steps of Polytheism's Return. Let us begin our historical journey from that majestic turning point, the true beginning that followed the great catastrophe. It was that decisive moment when the roaring of the waters subsided and the great flood ended, erasing the features of the ancient world. After the raging waves purified the face of the earth from all sin and polytheism, the ark of salvation rested in peace and tranquility upon the peak of Mount Judi. From it descended the prophet of God, Noah, peace be upon him, accompanied by the small group of believers who survived with him. They stepped onto a new, virgin land, a land completely washed by the flood from any long-standing corruption and any false belief that had polluted human nature. That beginning was pure, serene, and free from any defilement. Hearts and souls were united in the worship of God alone, without partners, and people lived their days adhering to the true, upright religion of Islam. From the loin of this small, believing nucleus, and from this pure starting point, humanity began its second journey to populate this vast, boundless universe. Noah's 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, set forth to spread across the far reaches of the vast earth. Carrying the trust of survival, they began to multiply and build, and from their lineages branched the various nations and tribes that filled the world. From the lineage of Shem came the Semitic nations and the Arabs who settled these regions. From the lineage of Ham emerged the African peoples who populated their continent, while Japheth was the father of the peoples of European origins who spread northward. Long years passed after years, generations succeeded generations, and humanity expanded powerfully to settle every place on the face of this earth. However, as always happens in the long course of human history, forgetfulness began to creep into minds, and distortion and misguidance began to carve a path once more to invade souls. You may wonder in utter astonishment and condemnation, how could people forget the lesson of the terrifying flood with such unbelievable, amazing speed? The answer is quite simple. The subsequent new generations did not see the destructive punishment with their own eyes. Nor did they live through the moments of terror in that catastrophe. They heard the stories and tales from their grandfathers, but their hearts did not feel the true, soul-shaking terror. This is the constant nature of human beings. We forget harsh lessons when they become distant in the reckoning of time, and we completely underestimate past warnings when the consequences are delayed in appearing. Here, and in the midst of this luxury, Satan found the opportune moment to resume his wicked work. He began to whisper to the people with cunning, beautifying the worship of others besides God in a gradual manner that did not draw attention. When polytheism first started among them, it did not begin with an explicit call to disbelief. Instead, it began covertly through emotional justifications. The people used to respect righteous men in their society and honor their memory out of love for them. When these righteous men passed away, Satan beautified for them the idea of building physical statues. of them under the pretext of reminding themselves of the goodness and righteousness they possessed. They justified this to themselves, saying, "We only want to remember these good people so that we may emulate their righteous deeds." Years passed until the generation that carved those statues perished, and the following generations came, having forgotten the original story and the initial purpose of their construction. They began to venerate these statues themselves until, out of ignorance and misguidance, they thought they were gods capable of benefiting or harming them instead of God. Thus, detestable polytheism returned, not in one sudden, giant step that the mind would reject, but through small, successive, and calculated satanic steps, each appearing outwardly innocent and well-intentioned. The first major Arab tribe to fall into this trap, returning with all its might to polytheism after the event of the flood, was a tribe whose news would be carved like a legend into the pages of history. They were the people of Anew. They were a people who would build with their own hands a terrifying architectural civilization, the likes of which the world had never seen in those ancient times. They were a people who would possess such supernatural physical strength that it would make them feel a false pride, that they were an invincible power and the undisputed masters of this earth. But before we delve into the terrifying details of their fall, let us first understand who exactly they were and how they reached the pinnacle of this mighty power. Chapter 2. The Geography of Al-Ahqaf and the Rise of the Giants. They are the people of Anew, whose lineage, rooted deep in the depths of history, traces back to Anew, the son of Uzi, the son of Aram, the son of Shem, the son of Noah, peace be upon him. This was the great ancestor and the original root whose name the tribe carried to be known by throughout the succession of times and eras. They were from the Arab Alabama, Ariba, the original pure Arabs who originated and resided in the heart of the Arabian Peninsula before the feet of any other people trod upon it after the flood. They were the direct descendants of Shem, perhaps representing only the second or third generation, making them the closest people in time to the era of Noah and to that miracle which saved humanity from extinction. Where did these people pitch their tents after they multiplied? The location here plays a fundamental and decisive role in understanding their story and the nature of their civilization. They inhabited a region of a harsh and unique nature called Al-Ahqaf, which are vast expanses of land located in the south of the Arabian Peninsula, specifically centered between the borders of Yemen, Oman, and Hadramaut. The word Al-Ahqaf linguistically means sand hills or dunes, where massive dunes and towering hills of shifting golden sands extend, interspersed with groups of solid rocky mountains that look out with loftiness and pride over the seacoasts. Their land was not a barren, desolate desert as we might imagine deserts today. Rather, in that bygone era, it was an extremely fertile land rich in all the elements of life, teeming with deep, flowing valleys and clear, flowing springs throughout the year. Imagine with me that breathtaking and simultaneously contrasting scene, gardens and springs filling the place with glamour and beauty, green oases in which vegetation pulsates amidst the folds of the barren desert. These oases were shaded by lofty, tall palm trees bearing the finest fruits, surrounded by rich farms stretching out with the vivid colors of crops. Fresh rivers flowed through the wide plains carefully prepared for agriculture, while towering mountains stood like a giant guard providing them with natural protection and a safe haven. They did not content themselves with the beauty and fertility of the surrounding nature. They also benefited from their unique strategic location, which granted them control over the most important maritime trade routes. That place was ideal and complete for building a legendary civilization, a place that gave its inhabitants a sense of perfection and made any people feel that God had favored them over much of the world in distinction and honor. This is exactly what the people of Edi felt. However, unfortunately, with the passage of time and the inflation of the ego, they felt that this greatness was achieved through their own strength and not by the grace of God, the bestower. Yet, the greatest secret and the legendary feature that distinguished the people of Aed from all the peoples of the earth lay not only in the charm of the place and the genius of the location, but manifested itself strikingly in the form of their bodies. They were true giants walking upon the face of the earth. They were not a mere fantasy narrated in tales, or an invention woven from the fabric of myths told to children before sleep. They were actual giants who lived and populated this earth with absolute reality. So much so that the Holy Quran itself immortalized their description and confirmed this supernatural physical reality when it described them, saying, "And increased you amply in stature." This means they were larger in size, taller in height, and much stronger than all those who lived in their time or preceded them. Some narrations transmitted in history books indicate that a single man among them reached a height of about 12 cubits, approximately 6 meters, a terrifying height that embraced the ceilings of buildings. Meanwhile, other narrations go on to assert that they were much taller than that. However, what is more important than knowing the exact number is comprehending this astounding reality. They were giants by all human standards and measures. They reached such a degree of supernatural muscular strength that a single man among them could approach a massive boulder, a mighty boulder that would require the combined effort of 10 strong men just to carry or think of moving, and lift it with one hand without any significant effort, then hurl it away as if it were a small pebble. They crossed vast, immense distances in the desert with long, few strides due to the length of their legs. And they built for themselves huge stone houses specially designed with doors and ceilings that matched their colossal sizes. With supernatural physical strength, a massive, tightly knit build that knew no weakness, and tall statures casting terrifying shadows on those around them, they fully deserved that majestic title immortalized for them by history, the giants. These were the men who would harness this strength not to populate the earth with truth, but to build a tyrannical city that defied the laws of heaven and earth. A city whose architectural details strain the mind to even imagine. The people of Aed were not merely a nomadic tribe living in simple tents in the middle of the desert. Instead, they harnessed their mighty strength to construct an architectural civilization that struck history with astonishment. They built their legendary capital, Iram of the Pillars, that great city whose mention the Holy Quran immortalized, confirming that the like of which was not created in the lands. The term pillars, al-imad, here refers to the massive stone columns that raised the arches of their towering palaces. A single column, carved with utmost precision and masterfully decorated with artistic skill, would under normal circumstances require dozens of men just to move. Yet, a giant from the people of Ad would lift it alone and fix it to embrace the heart of the sky. Their buildings were not merely structures for housing and protection from the harshness of nature. They transcended boundaries of necessity to become symbols of pride, arrogance, and the display of grandeur. They constructed luxurious palaces, majestic temples, spacious squares, and hanging gardens. In fact, they deliberately chose the highest peaks and elevated hills to build towers upon them without any practical purpose other than showing off, to say to the world, "Look at how invincible a power we are." The Quran described this architectural futility by saying, "Do you construct on every elevation a sign, amusing yourselves?" It was engineering that preceded its time, and a high artistic taste that made their city a masterpiece centered amidst the sands of the southern peninsula. Their architectural ambition did not stop at building above the surface of the earth. They defied the hardness of nature and directed their tools toward the hearts of mountains. They dove into the core of the solid rock, carving spacious rooms, halls, and corridors to transform the deaf mountain into comfortable palaces that suited their sizes and reflected their joy and pride in what they could do, as stated in the precise description of their state. And you carve houses out of the mountains with great skill. This arduous work required immense patience and advanced excavation technology that served as the greatest secret of their superiority. As for water management, it was another engineering miracle added to their rich record. They realized that water was the lifeline in their environment, so they built massive dams, dug extremely deep wells, carved intricate irrigation canals, and established what were called factories, Masanic, which in their language meant giant pools, and reservoirs they excavated in the belly of the rock to collect rainwater to suffice them for a whole year's supply. This gave them the illusion of permanence and eternity, as the text described them. And you take castles that you might remain eternally. Thanks to this abundance of water, agriculture flourished in an unparalleled manner. Their lands turned into lush gardens of palms, grapevines, and fields of wheat and barley, in addition to orchards overflowing with diverse fruits. This was accompanied by vast livestock wealth of cattle, sheep, and camels in immense numbers, which provided them with food from meat and milk and clothing from wool. They lacked nothing to rule. Even their coastal location made them control with. An iron fist the arteries of maritime trade connecting Africa and India. They possessed all the elements of worldly power that a human could aspire to. So what did they do with it? This is what we will learn in our next chapter. Chapter 4: The 5 Blessings and the Beginning of Tyranny. Let us pause for a moment to comprehend the magnitude of the gifts bestowed upon the people of Ad. They were not just ordinary people blessed with familiar things. Rather, they sat at the pinnacle of the human pyramid in almost everything. The Creator endowed them with 5 major blessings that were sufficient to make them a nation leading the world toward goodness, had they utilized them well. The first blessing was supernatural physical strength. At a time when the rest of humanity struggled and sweated to lift a small stone to build a simple hut, the giants of Ad played with mighty rocks as if they were light toys. This excessive strength planted a blind confidence in their souls and made them feel that they were an absolute power that could not be defeated in any battle, forgetting that this solidity was not from their earning or diligence, but was a divine gift with which they were created. The second blessing was represented in the fertile, giving land, a land whose springs burst forth and whose clouds shaded it with rain to grow the most delicious fruits and the finest crops. While other tribes starved in the heart of barren deserts, the people of Ad turned over in abundant bliss. They never tasted the bitterness of hunger, nor did they know the meaning of thirst. Instead, everything was in their hands in an abundance that provoked envy. The third blessing was manifested in abundant children and offspring, as portrayed by the Quran, and reinforced you with wealth and sons. The sons were not merely small children. They were robust youths and giant men who protected the sanctuary of the tribe. From them, a huge army was formed that struck terror into the heart of any greedy outsider. For who would dare to attack a tribe that included thousands of giants armed with might? The fourth blessing was knowledge and civilized development. They were not merely strong beasts without minds. Rather, they were granted a sharp intelligence with which they excelled in the sciences of engineering, the secrets of construction, and the management of water and agricultural resources. They excelled in carving rocks to create a civilization that became a proverb. The fifth blessing crowned all of that with complete security and stability. There were no wars draining their blood, no epidemics ravaging their bodies, and no disasters threatening their urban development. They lived in absolute tranquility, each year bringing greater bounty than the one before it, until it was imagined by them that this prosperity would last forever and that their end was impossible. But what was the result of this divine favor? Did they thank the one who granted them? Did they harness their strength to aid the weak and spread justice? Unfortunately, ingratitude was the master of the situation. Instead of gratitude, disbelief crept in. Instead of humility, arrogance tyrannized, and oppressive injustice took the place of justice. The strength that was a safety valve turned into a tool for violence and despotism, so they were as was said of them. And when you strike as tyrants. They became ruthless in their punishment, attacking weaker tribes, confiscating their lands, plundering their wealth, and enslaving their men without a shred of conscience. Strength blinded them from seeing the truth, and they thought that the strong is always the one in the right. As for wealth, instead of being a balm for the needy, it was used for extravagance and boasting. They built palaces for pride, not for living, and held lavish banquets to display prestige before others, completely forgetting the one who provided for them. Arrogance reached a point that made them ask in haughtiness and insolence, "Who is greater than us in strength?" A word they said with all arrogance, ignoring that the one who created them and formed them is stronger than them, and that his grip is capable of stripping away everything in the blink of an eye. They made the bomb of death with their own hands, and it had to explode. Chapter 5. The worship of stones and the authority of priests, the worst thing these tyrannical giants committed, and the most dangerous and degrading slip into the abyss of misguidance, was that they left the worship of God, the one, the unique, who created the heavens and the earth and granted them all that they possessed, and bowed their lofty heads and mighty bodies to prostrate to idols. Imagine with me this strange paradox that minds fail to comprehend. A people who reached such a degree of intelligence, knowledge, and strength that enabled them to carve solid mountains and construct legendary palaces, the like of which was not created in the lands, then stand humiliated and submissive before deaf stone statues. They made them with their own hands and carved them from the deaf rock that they were playing with moments before due to their strength. Then they devoted themselves to them and offered sacrifices so that they would be pleased with them. They were infatuated with the worship of three main idols known by the names of Sad, Samad, and Haba. These were nothing but dead, rigid stones possessing neither harm nor benefit, hearing no call, seeing no condition, and feeding no hungry person. So what drives a nation that has reached this amount of intelligence and discernment to descend into this deep depth of naivety? The answer is summarized in an incurable disease that paralyzed the movement of thought in them, namely, blind imitation. When they were asked about the secret of their attachment to these miserable stones, they bragged with one ready, made phrase that silenced every voice of reason. Indeed, we found our fathers upon a religion, and we are in their footsteps guided. This meant that merely seeing their fathers and grandfathers worshipping these idols was considered, in their view, conclusive evidence that this was the absolute right path. They completely deactivated the blessing of the mind that God had bestowed upon them and canceled the faculty of thinking. They did not pose a single question to search for the absent truth, nor did they bother to ask themselves, how can a stone create or provide? This intellectual paralysis and collective herd behavior behind corrupt inheritances without contemplation was the main gateway through which they entered to their doom. To make matters worse and tighten the grip on these hijacked minds, there existed a beneficial class of the grandees and leaders of the people who supported this polytheism and nurtured it with all the cunning they possessed. Because the survival of these idols meant the inevitability of the survival of their interests and the inflation of their wealth. A class of custodian priests appeared among them who installed themselves as servants to these statues and exclusive mediators between them and the common people. They reaped immense amounts of money and accepted precious gifts and sacrifices from the rich wishing to gain the pleasure of the gods. At the same time, these priests exploited this false religion as an effective weapon to terrify the poor and simple folk of the wrath of the gods and their curses, to keep them submissive, surrendered, and yielding under the yoke of control and complete dependency. The exploitation was not limited to the false religious class only, rather kings and princes were also involved in weaving this cunning game. They found in idols an ideal pretext for despotism, so they promoted among the subjects that these holy gods were the ones who chose them for the throne of governance and granted them authority, and consequently, no being was allowed to object to their decisions or revolt against their injustice. Thus, in the society of the giants of Al-Ahqaf, a terrifying mixture loaded with danger was formed, supernatural physical strength striking without leniency, added to obscene material wealth provoking luxury. Along with blind pride and arrogance, and deep-rooted polytheism with God canceling the voice of human nature and blind imitation deepening ignorance, and above all this and that, a corrupt leadership nurturing all of that to fix its thrones. This toxic mixture was a time bomb, and it was inevitable that it would explode in their faces sooner or later to erase their trace from existence. However, the mercy of God necessitated that this bomb should not explode except after sending a warner to try to salvage what could be salvaged. Chapter 6: The Choosing of Hud, PBUH, and the Dawn of Truth. At the peak of this terrifying tyranny, and in the heart of that suffocating spiritual darkness that wrapped around the city of Iram, the people of AD reached the utmost degrees of corruption. They persisted in their tyranny, enslaved the weak, and prostrated to death stones that neither harmed nor benefited, deceived by their supernatural physical strength and their towering palaces that they carved in the hearts of mountains. In such decisive moments of humanity's life, where it seems that evil has tightened its grip on everything and that the voice of reason has completely faded. In such decisive moments of humanity's life, where it seems that evil has tightened its grip on everything, and that the voice of reason has completely faded, divine providence interferes to restore balance to this universe. It was not wise to leave these giants wreaking corruption in the earth without warning or guidance, so a warner had to be sent to awaken them from their slumber. But who was the person capable of standing in the face of an entire nation, a nation possessing such violence and tyranny that terrifies hearts? Angels did not descend from heaven to address them, because the argument of the giants would then be ready. You are light beings who do not know our human nature and do not understand our desires and needs. Therefore, wisdom necessitated that the one sent to them be a man from among them, of their own clay, speaking their language, walking in their markets, and understanding the nature of their thinking perfectly, a man they had known since his birth and had experienced his upbringing, youth, and manhood. From among the ranks of these giants, and from the most intermediate of them in lineage, and the most honorable and highly positioned, emerged a man characterized by perfection of mind and wisdom of thought. He was the prophet of God, Hud, peace be upon him. Hud was not a strange newcomer to the tribe, rather, he was a dutiful son among its sons, belonging to a family of high lineage and nobility, which blocked the way against the arrogant who might reject his call under the pretext that he was from a lower class or that he was seeking personal glory or authority he lacked. He was noble among his people, known for his fragrant biography, good manners, and integrity that was beyond doubt. Throughout the years of his life before he was tasked with carrying the message of prophecy, Hud was never polluted by the swamp of polytheism in which his people drowned. His forehead never bowed a single day to an idol, nor did he participate in the banquets of extravagance and injustice held by the masters of AD. His heart was attached to a pure human nature that refused to believe that those stones carved by human hands could create, provide, or manage the intricate affairs of the universe. From the physical aspect, Hud, peace be upon him, possessed a majestic, massive build suitable for the nature of his people among the giants. He was not weak or frail for them to underestimate him. Rather, he was strong and of a majestic appearance that imposed respect on everyone who stood before him. However, Hud's true strength lay not in his muscles like the rest of his people, but resided in the strength of his certainty, the solidity of his logic, and his absolute courage that made him stand completely alone, carrying neither sword nor shield. In the face of an entire nation armed with arrogance and violence, when the revelation descended upon him, and he carried the heavy trust of the call, he did not hesitate and did not retreat. Instead, he went out to them in their gatherings and clubs where they bragged, to stand before the masters of Iram, its priests and its kings, announcing in a calm and confident voice, a voice that would shake the pillars of their false civilization. The beginning of the great confrontation between the light of reason and the darkness of pride. And here began the most dangerous dialogue in the history of the ancient Arabian Peninsula. Chapter 7: The Great Confrontation and the Rise of the True Call. In the vast squares of Iram of the Pillars, paved with massive stones that ordinary humans failed to move, and under the shadows of its towering palaces that reflected the pride and tyranny of their inhabitants, the prophet of God, Hud, peace be upon him, stood to announce the beginning of the greatest intellectual and ideological confrontation known to the Arabian Peninsula at that time. Hud did not choose a dark corner to whisper his call secretly, nor did he fear the violence of his rulers. Rather, he spoke the truth in broad daylight before the crowds of giants deceived by their strength, and in a direct and public confrontation with the masters of the people, their grandees, and their priests who were exploiting the minds of the common folk to protect their interests. The situation was majestic and fraught with danger. A single man, unarmed with any physical weapon, armed only with an unshakable faith of certainty, standing like a lofty mountain before an entire nation possessing such violence and brute force that shakes the firmly fixed mountains. His first words were like a bold spark ignited in a dry forest of the pride and arrogance of AD. Hud began his call using a method overflowing with wisdom, patience, and profound mercy. He did not use the language of threats or the terror of warnings at first. Instead, he addressed them with a gentle appeal that stirred their emotions and reminded them of the bonds of blood and lineage that tied him to them, saying, "O my people." He wanted to assure them with utter sincerity that he was their son, that he was from them and for them, fearing for them what he feared for himself, wishing for them only goodness, righteousness, and salvation from a dark destiny, existence, and completely demolish the foundation of their myths, root and branch. Worship Allah. Then, he delivered to them the fundamental message that touched the very core of their "you have no deity other than him." These were few, numbered words, yet they carried within them a comprehensive revolution against all corrupt heritages. He clearly called upon them to awaken their intellects, which they had willingly deactivated, and demanded that they abandon those death stones they had carved with their own hands. Those idols could neither hear the cry of a seeker of help, nor return an answer to a questioner. And they possessed neither harm nor benefit. He reminded them that the one Creator, who had granted them all this power, was alone worthy of worship, veneration, and absolute submission, to break the barrier of deep, rooted pride in their souls. Hud, PBUH, resorted to reviewing milestones of recent history that they knew all too well, using the logic of reminding them of consecutive blessings. He reminded them of the terrifying event that had not yet been erased from human memory. The event of the flood that destroyed the people of Noah, those who denied their messengers, so the water erased them from existence. He asked them, condemning their absent minds, "And remember when he made you successors after the people of Noah." Meaning, Remember that Allah Almighty is the one who chose you by His grace and favor to inherit this earth after He purified it of the deniers before you. So do not repeat their mistakes, lest you face their destiny. Next, He moved on to remind them of the greatest blessing. They bragged about day and night, their physical build, and increased you amply in stature. He wanted them to understand with absolute clarity that these well-knit muscles, towering statures, and supernatural strength which enabled them to crush enemies and carve solid mountains were nothing but a temporary divine gift and a severe trial from the Creator to see how they would use it. His logic was as clear as the midday sun. Is it rational that Allah provides you with all these blessings, showering you with water, livestock, and gardens, and then you deny His favor and turn away with utter naivety to thank a miserable rock you carved with your own hands? Chapter 8. Futile Debate and Defying the Destructive Punishment. However, as is the case with every tyrannical despot throughout the ages, and as is the nature of every opportunistic class that fears for its material interests and political power, the reaction of the Mala, the nobles and leaders of the people, was characterized by arrogance, condescension, and absolute stupidity. They did not debate him with logic, nor did they argue with proof and evidence that refutes evidence. Instead, they immediately resorted to insult, bullying, and belittling his opinion, the cheap weapon of anyone incapable of facing the truth. The grandees of the people, those who enslaved others and controlled their wealth in the name of false gods, stood up to reply to this divine call with words filled with patronizing mockery. Indeed, we see you in foolishness, and indeed, we think you are of the liars. They accused him of foolishness, meaning recklessness of mind, levity, and the absence of sound vision. Imagine that absurdity! Those who worshipped a ridiculous piece of stone described the only man calling them to use their reason as foolish and stupid. These words were a calculated, preemptive strike by the leaders of society to prevent the masses from listening to him, and a miserable attempt at character assassination to defame his reputation before the public before his definitive proof could reach their hearts and awaken them from their slumber. In the face of this severe provocation, and before these false, harsh accusations leveled against him publicly before his peers and his tribe, how did the Prophet of God, Hud, PBUH, respond? He did not get angry for his personal dignity, nor did he champion his own ego. He did not trade insult for insult, abandoning the high station of prophecy and its sublime morals. Instead, he answered them with steadfastness and a mountain, like certainty that knew no shaking or retreat. O my people, there is no foolishness in me, but I am a messenger from the Lord of the worlds. I convey to you the messages of my Lord, and I am to you a trustworthy advisor. He politely and with great forbearance denied the charge of foolishness, then immediately brought them back to the core of the central issue. He reminded them of his pure past, which they knew very well, for he had been nicknamed among them as the truthful and trustworthy throughout his life. So why did they call him a liar today only when he brought them the truth that opposed their desires? Hud was not asking them for a material wage, nor for political leadership, nor for palaces to be carved for him in the mountains as they did. He was merely a trustworthy advisor carrying within his chest the anxiety of saving them from certain destruction and a painful torment. Chapter 9. Years of Drought and the Deception of the Black Cloud. The punishment did not come all at once. Instead, it followed the law of gradual progression to slowly break that inflated pride, making them taste the bitterness of helplessness and scarcity. The first step on the journey of destruction was depriving them of the most precious and simplest secret of their existence, a drop of water. Suddenly, and without prior warning, the sky withheld its bounty, and rain ceased over the land of Al-Ahqaf. The first year passed, and they thought it was a passing drought that would go away as others had. But the second year arrived with a harsher, more merciless sun. And then the third year set in to declare the slow death of all forms of life in those lush gardens. The springs that used to flow abundantly dried up, the deep wells emptied, and the fertile land cracked until it became a desolate desert. The leaves of their trees fell, their farms perished, and the livestock they used to boast about in numbers began to fall one after another from the severity of thirst. Their lowing echoed in the valleys like a sad elegy for a dying civilization. During those lean days, the giants began to taste the bitterness of humiliation and disgrace. What is the use of well-knit muscles if the throat is dry and cannot find a single drop of water to wet its dryness? What is the value of towering palaces if their inhabitant is writhing in thirst within their courtyards? Their true weakness was exposed to them, but stubbornness had completely taken over their hearts. HUD, PBUH, came to them with a final call of mercy, calling out to them with a voice that pierced the silence of the drought. And, O my people, ask forgiveness of your Lord, and then repent to him. He will send rain from the sky upon you in abundance and increase you in strength added to your strength. He gave them the key to their relief, seeking forgiveness, repentance. And returning to Allah was the only way for the waters to return to their courses. Yet, instead of answering the call, they turned with total ignorance and folly toward their deaf idols. They drove their offerings, presented their sacrifices, and circumambulated those stones, begging them to send rain, acting just like someone seeking help from the sand to quench his thirst. On one scorching day, when despair had reached its peak in their souls, something appeared on the distant horizon that they had not seen for 3 long years, a massive, dense black cloud, crawling slowly across the heart of the sky and heading directly toward their valleys and city. No sooner did the people of Ad see this sight than their faces lit up after frowning, and they leaped from their places, dancing with joy and delight. They all rushed out of their homes, old and young, men and women, pointing their hands to the sky, shouting in a joyful, collective chant, "This is a cloud bringing us rain." They thought that their idols, whom they had sought closeness to, had answered them, and that this dense, dark cloud carried the rain that would restore life to their land and rid them of the nightmare of thirst that had almost annihilated them. But HUD, who saw by the light of insight what they could not see with their arrogant eyes, stood looking at that terrifying cloud with a heart dwelling in sadness and sorrow for his people, who had chosen destruction of their own free will. He looked at them as they danced in ecstasy, and said to them with a voice bearing a tone of grief and absolute certainty that this was the end. "Nay, it is that which you were asking to be hastened, a wind wherein is a painful torment." That black cloud was not rain to revive the earth after its death. Rather, it was an army of raging, poised winds, carrying swift death in its belly to write the final chapter in the story of the strongest civilization known to humanity until that time. The gates of hell had opened, and the time for a harsh reckoning had come. Chapter 10, The Furious Wind and the End of the Legend. Only a few moments after their false joy, the rays of the sun were completely blocked, and a terrifying darkness loomed over the city of Iram in broad daylight. Suddenly, their hysterical joy at the approaching cloud turned into a terror that paralyzed their bodies. The cloud did not rain a single drop of water to quench their thirst. Instead, a freezing, icy wind blew from it. A wind the likes of which no human had ever experienced before. It was the fierce, sarsar, roaring and furious wind. The word sarsar in Arabic means an extremely cold wind that produces a terrifying, deafening sound like the screeching of iron or the friction of massive rocks grinding against one another. The wind began to increase in violence and speed within seconds, surpassing all familiar laws of nature. It was not merely a wild storm. It was a rational, destructive force unleashed by the command of its lord. Terrified and stumbling, the giants rushed toward their towering palaces and fled toward the homes they had carved with their own hands in the hearts of mountains, thinking that those thick rocky walls would protect them from the punishment. They locked the massive iron doors and fortified themselves in the depths of caves. However, the divine wind did not recognize their fortresses. It seeped into them through every crack and fissure, ripping the doors from their roots as if they were fragile, decayed autumn leaves, dragging them out violently from their hiding places. This terrifying torment continued, as the Holy Quran described it with ultimate precision. For 7 nights and 8 days uninterruptedly, meaning consecutively without interruption, without a truce, and without a single moment of calm to catch their breath. Imagine that continuous horror for more than 190 consecutive hours of screaming wind and the throes of death. The wind would uproot a giant man with all his bulk, height, and the strength he used to boast about, lifting him into the whirling air like a light feather, then flipping him onto his head, smashing him against the rocks of the earth with a brutal force that severed the head from the body. It left them dead and torn apart, exactly as depicted by the miraculous divine description. So you could see the people therein fallen executed, as if they were hollow trunks of palm trees. Colossal, decapitated corpses lay scattered upon the sands, just like uprooted palm trunks that are hollowed out from within. The wind spared nothing and left nothing behind. It shattered the palaces built for boasting, broke the mighty columns of Iram, leveled their arrogant towers to the ground, and buried their wealth and civilization in the blink of an eye beneath the sands of the harsh Al-Ahqaf desert. In the midst of this comprehensive destruction, where everything was breaking and flying through the air, there was one safe spot surrounded by tranquility and peace. Allah had commanded his prophet Hud and those with him of the oppressed believers to isolate themselves in a specific enclosure. That same destructive wind that was crushing the giants outside passed over them as a gentle, cool breeze that did not harm a single hair on them. This was a magnificent cosmic sign proving that the forces of nature operate by the command of their creator. They are a severe punishment upon the arrogant and coolness and peace upon the believers. After the 8 days had passed, on the morning of the 9th day, the wind suddenly died down just as it had suddenly begun. The black cloud cleared, and the sun shone anew upon a scene that bleeds hearts and stuns minds. A terrifying silence of death descended upon the place that used to buzz with life, noise, and pride. The nation of giants was completely annihilated. Do you see any remnant of them? Not one of them remained to tell the story to future generations, and the decisive divine promise was fulfilled upon them. And they became not seen except their dwellings, hollow ruins, broken columns, and decaying corpses buried beneath the golden sands, which became a mass grave for an entire civilization erased by the sin of pride. Conclusion: eternal lessons. Hud, PBUH, went out with the surviving group, looking in eloquent silence at this immense ruin. The story had ended, and the curtain fell on the fiercest human power. However, those buried ruins remained witness to eternal lessons that humanity must inherit. First, material power and architectural achievement, no matter how great they become, avail a human nothing if their morals corrupt and they abandon the worship of their creator. Second, blind imitation of fathers and society in falsehood is a fake justification and a paved road toward destruction. Third and finally, arrogance and pride are the most fatal diseases to afflict nations. When the people of AD believed they were invincible, saying in their vanity, "Who is greater than us in strength?" Destruction came to them from one of the weakest and gentlest creatures of Allah before it rages. Destruction came to them from the very air they breathe. Thank you for watching the Dodi Drama channel. I hope you enjoyed the story. Join our big family now. Subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell, and enjoy your time in this enchanting world.